Research repeatedly shows that people aren't quitting their job or their organization. They're usually quitting their manager, and they're usually quitting their direct manager. Another way to put that is that people's direct manager has the greatest impact on one's morale. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. Ethan here. So today I have a bit of a different episode to share with you. What I'm sharing with you here today is a snippet of a live workshop that I recorded with a group of leaders from a variety of different organizations several months ago. So these leaders, they attended our signature leadership development series online, and this series is called, Managing with Mind and Heart. Go figure. This online workshop series is something that we hold several times a year for any leaders from any place to sign up for. And so again, I'm going to share with you a snippet of this workshop today. And over the next several weeks and months, I'm going to continue to share more snippets of this workshop. So I hope you enjoy what you're listening to. And by the way, if you're maybe interested in signing up to attend our Managing with Mind and Heart workshop series online, would love to have you there. Go ahead and just go to our website, nashconsulting.com. And if you hover over the offerings tab, you'll see a button that says Managing with Mind and Heart Online Experience. This is always a fun time. We love holding these workshops online. Again, just leaders coming from all different walks of life, some brand new leaders, some that have been managers for many years, and they bring so much wisdom to the table, and it is always an awesome time. So hope you'll consider signing up and enjoy the episode today. Oh, and by the way, we've edited out any voices or comments from any of the participants in the workshop. So you'll just hear me talking. You're not going to hear any of the interaction or questions or group work that happens all throughout this workshop series. All right, enjoy. So let's talk a little bit about morale, workplace morale. Big concept here, and we're going to start a little bit negative. We'll get happy here in a moment, I promise. But let's talk about this. What do you get when you have low morale in the workplace? Like, what comes with low morale? What results from low morale? So lack of productivity. We would all generally agree when there's low morale, there's going to be low productivity. And in fact, let's put a few terms together here. Let's say there's going to be low productivity, low quality, and low performance. Okay, let's just group those together as one. Now let's go a little bit deeper with this. What do you think the connection is there? What is the connection between low morale and things like low performance, low quality? It's about feeling inspired that results from morale. So I'm not going to engage in my work to the same degree. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of my, and just our Nash teams in general, favorite quotes that I think speaks to this concept is from Stephen Covey. Okay? You can pay people for their backs and you can pay people for their hands, but they volunteer their hearts and they volunteer their brains. Meaning, and this is how I translate this, you can pay people to show up to work to do the basics, but if you really want them to engage in the work, to volunteer their hearts and minds into the work, that's their choice to make. In a low morale environment, they're not going to do that. Right? So what we're talking about here is engagement. Engagement seems to be the golden egg that every organization is looking for, right? We want employee engagement because I think we can intuit all the things that leads to that we want in the workplace. But look, low morale and engagement tend not to go with each other. So low performance, because we're not investing, we're not inspired. Low quality, low performance. So good. So what else? What else comes with low morale? Yeah, in low morale environment, you tend to get conflict, and sometimes you tend to get no conflict, which sounds counterintuitive. So when you do get conflict, it tends to be what we call the unhealthy type of organizational conflict, where it's kind of more like junior high behavior type conflict. We're focusing on the person and it's a little bit more insulting, as opposed to what we consider actually healthy conflict in an organization, which we might translate as healthy disagreement, which is, hey, we're willing to disagree about tasks, about ideas, and there's some healthy dialogue about that. But yeah, you get that unhealthy conflict. Junior high behavior, like, is this really what I have to put up with in the workplace? In a low morale environment, people are going to find more reasons why not to come to work. Surprise anybody? In fact, this is interesting. There was this auto manufacturing facility down in California, and I think this was in the early 90s. And they were known for having some of the lowest morale in the industry. And absenteeism was so bad that they couldn't even produce cars on Mondays and Fridays. 2 out of the 5 work days, they couldn't even produce cars because absenteeism was so bad. So yeah, it gets pretty messy. So I say quiet quitting, right? And to me, quiet quitting is basically a lack of engagement, right? I'm just not going to be engaged in the work. Right? Yeah, lack of self-worth, purpose of the job, absolutely. We tend to turn it inwards, right? Communicate less with each other. You tend to see more kind of what we call workplace triangulation or negativity, where we're just kind of sharing gossip. That lack of spirit, because again, I think in a low morale environment, it tends to be more of a fear-based environment. And when we are in a fear-based environment, we turn inwards, right? It becomes about self-protection, right? And less about the collective team working together. How about just like high turnover, low retention in a low morale environment? In fact, I know this sounds a little bit snarky, but what I tend to find is that in a low morale environment, the people you kind of wish would stay end up leaving because they think, well, hey, I don't have to deal with this. I'm going somewhere else. And it's the people that you kind of wish would leave and can end up staying. Because it's like, hey, low morale environment. Great, I'm home. Right? And they stir up that low morale pot. Good. I heard a lack of innovation in the chat. Absolutely. Right? Because we're going to be afraid to suggest new things. There'll be more defensiveness. There's more kind of punishment for failure. So I'm not going to try new things. We tend to get stuck. Toxic environment. Yeah, almost high school environment. Absolutely. Right? That gossip we're talking about, forming those cliques. Triangulation. Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, of course, has a bottom line component to it. And this is pretty clear in the research, right? For an organization's financial situation, from the turnover and the absenteeism and all those type of things. All right. That's what happens with low morale. Right? Let's get happy here for a moment. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this. What do you get when you have high morale in the workplace? And you can't just say the opposite of everything we just said. All right, let's give a few words or phrases here. What comes with high morale? You get people willing to invest their effort, right? Go beyond just doing the basics. Absolutely. Quality of work tends to go up, as well as productivity, performance, extend a helping hand, those type of things. So we actually enjoy coming to work, or at the very least, we don't dislike coming to work. Right? Good. It's more appreciation. Absolutely. You know, one thing I read recently, which was interesting to me, is that morale and training were equal indicators of workplace safety. Meaning the higher the morale, the less workplace safety incidents there are, and vice versa. Low morale, more workplace safety incidents. And at first I didn't understand what was going on there. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But then I started to think about it more. And it made sense, right? It's like, in a low morale environment, so we're back to low morale, we tend to maybe cut corners because we're not as engaged. We don't have each other's backs as much, leads to safety incidents and things like that. Well, look, we could probably keep naming things that happen with high morale and low morale, right? You tend to get more ownership. We tend to get better customer service, right? One of my pet peeves here, just to go on a bit of a tangent, is when organizations invest a whole lot of time and energy into customer service, but they don't invest any time in the morale. of the organization, right? Because it's really hard to give a better service to others than how you're feeling internally in an organization. So you get better customer service, better safety, better attendance, or just a general positive culture, better communication. We tend to see people behaving more empathetically towards each other, which is huge. So a couple points here. So point number A, although we've named the results of high morale and low morale, can you also see that some of these are the causes of high morale and low morale? Okay, so take junior high behavior, since that's one of my favorites. Right? Junior high behavior is going to cause low morale, but junior high behavior is also going to be a result of low morale. Okay, so it can be a bit of a reinforcing loop here in a sense. The other point I want to make here is just that high morale won't automatically bring all those cool things we just listed. And it's just high morale to get all those cool things. But here's the thing, they can't happen at all without first having high morale in the workplace. So high morale is necessary, but not sufficient for all of those cool things, which is what we're going to work on throughout our series together. Point number C, my final point on this, folks, is just that morale is a really big deal. It really is, right? Sometimes I get this vibe that it's kind of like it's just this touchy-feely thing, or it's a no big deal thing, or it's something that just happens when we do team building activities and trust falls, right? It's actually a really big thing. And we know that it leads to engagement, right? And we know that the highest performing teams are the most engaged. And not only the highest performing teams, but teams in which people enjoy their jobs the most. So morale is a really big deal. So what factors are going to contribute to high morale in the workplace? Shared decision-making, recognition, follow-through, and what was the other thing I heard? Yeah, some transparency. Okay, let me double click on transparency for a moment here, because I find that we all just sometimes have different definitions of what transparency looks like. So what would transparency look like in relation to, building high morale in the workplace? We know it's expected, and then people are held accountable to those expectations. Kind of a common vision, common mission. Yeah, we can all rally behind that. It's clear. Fairness in the workplace. I want to share with you these 4 different sources of workplace morale. So, folks, the research that we've done and the research that we've reviewed has led us to believe that there are these 4 main sources of workplace morale. Okay, now here's the disclaimer on this. We kind of made up these percentages, right? However, this is our best estimate based on a lot of research. So the 4 main sources of morale. At roughly 8% is individual outlook. Okay. Now, how many of you would agree that there is some personal responsibility for one's morale? Now, some of you might even be thinking that this percentage should be bigger, right? It's only 8%. Now, I want you all to one more time read the words in the middle of that square. What does that say? Workplace morale. What it does not say is personal happiness. And I want us to understand that workplace morale and personal happiness are not exactly the same thing. Now, if we were talking about personal happiness, maybe 60% would be based on individual outlook, right? And maybe 30% are based on our genetics, right? The cards that we were handed at birth. Maybe 9% is based on our personal circumstances. And maybe 1% is based on all those indulgences in life, such as, coffee, wine, chocolate, a few of my favorite. But that's if we were talking about personal happiness. We're talking about workplace morale. Now, side note here, you're not going to see anything here in our conversation about the sources of workplace morale that has to do with salary, money, benefits. Right? So now, some research indicates that getting a pay raise would increase your workplace morale for about 3 to 6 weeks. And what happens after those 3 to 6 weeks after your pay raise? The morale goes back down. Because here's what's not happening 6 weeks after a pay raise, right? You're driving to work and you're thinking, oh gosh, you know what? Well, my manager sucks. My colleagues are kind of annoying. The work I do is just not fun at all. But you know what? I have really high morale because I got that raise 6 weeks ago. No. But you know what that raise is affecting 6 months from now? Your personal happiness, right? At least at some level. I know they say money can't buy happiness, right? I bought a new pair of skis a few years ago and it made me kind of happy. I got to be honest. So take that as you will, right? Now, here's the thing. If I recognize that one of my employees is doing a great job, right? They're meeting expectations or exceeding expectations even, and I decide to give her a pay raise, that might increase her morale. But was it the money that increased her morale? Probably not. And what was it that might have boosted her morale? The recognition. The recognition, the praise that brings. Right? So I won't jam on this for too much longer, but money, what we find in the literature is money is an extrinsic motivator. And although it can motivate, it's usually pretty short-lived. Right? Intrinsic motivators like recognition tend to be far more powerful. All right, back on track here. Individual outlook, 8% source of morale. There is some personal responsibility for morale. That 12% is your coworkers. So morale will be impacted by the people you work with every day. Right? Do they accept me? Are they open to me? Do I feel included by them? Do I feel respected by them? Do we have at least some level of shared values with each other? Right? So there are a lot of really cool things or painful things that can result from the people we work with every day. Side note on this, again, when studies have looked at some of the highest performing teams, once again, they find those teams have high morale and high engagement, right? Go figure. But within these teams, most people can report out that they have a friend at work. Mm-hmm. So we know this is a factor here. Now, at 15%, which is a fairly large chunk, it's the work itself that will be a source of workplace morale. All right, so I'm going to take a side trip on this one because there are 4 ways the work is going to impact morale. But the first one is I actually enjoy what I do, right? I mean, I'm actually kind of good at it. It matches my skill set. The second way the work impacts morale, and this one's important, is this is what we call the challenge competency continuum. This means that I feel both challenged in my role and I have some level of competency in it. Right? The challenge competency continuum. Now, most people, most of the time, prefer to be somewhere in the middle of this continuum, a balance between feeling challenged and competent. Now, as a manager, as a people leader, you should know where your employees are at on this continuum. Right? So if you're building an action plan for yourself throughout today and Thursday, this might be one of those action plans. You should know where your employees are at. And how are you going to find out where your employees are at on this continuum? You ask them, right? And so during your one-on-one meetings with your employees, I encourage you to ask these 3 questions right here. Number 1, where would you put yourself on the challenge competency continuum? And you might even put a time frame to this. Over the last 6 months or so, where would you put yourself on this continuum? The other question is, where would you like to be? Would you like to be further in the middle, more to the left, more to the right? And the third question here, can anybody guess this one? How can I help you get there? Now, if you asked one of your team members, one of your employees, hey, where would you put yourself on this challenge competency continuum over the last 6 months? And they answered pretty close to all the way to the challenge side. Like I'm all the way to the left-hand side. How do you think they're feeling right now if they're all the way over there? Overwhelmed, right? They don't have the time to do everything they need to do, right? Maybe they don't feel like they have the tools or the resources or the skills, right? Maybe they leave each day not feeling like they accomplished very much. Right? I'm seeing burnt out here. Absolutely. Now, how about if they said, well, over the last 6 months, I'm like all the way to the competent side, like all the way to the right hand. right? How might they be feeling? Bored, motivated, complacent, apathetic, maybe. Now, what's interesting is that we find that both of these two extremes, being way to the left or way to the right, both of these can overactivate our sympathetic nervous system. And when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, which, by the way, is a network of nerves that helps our body activate its fight or flight response, when those are activated, it tends to shut down learning, self-reflection, and growth. Now, isn't that interesting? Both of these extremes activates the sympathetic nervous system. Okay? So this might be an interesting conversation to have with your employees. Now, just another little side tour on this, just because kind of a nerd about this, but this is what they call the Yerkes-Dodson stress curve, put together by a few neuroscientists. And I think this kind of demonstrates what I'm talking about here. So what they find is that as your stress level increases from a very low point, your performance quality actually starts to go up. So they call this the arousal level. So it goes up, 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 up. Your performance level as stress is increasing until it hits that certain point where the stress is too much and performance starts to go down. So again, this is just to demonstrate that they find that when people are kind of in the zone at the highest performing state, there is a intermediate level of stress, if that makes sense. Right? Okay. So the third way the work impacts morale, there's meaning to what I do. Right? I actually know that I'm contributing to the success of the organization or the communities we serve, and so on and so forth. One of my favorite stories about this that I think demonstrates it is they did this bus driver study. And so basically they took a group of bus drivers and somehow they measured their sense of meaning in their jobs. And they all had really low levels of meaning. Like they didn't see their work as important at all. And so then what the researchers did is they went out to people that would commute on the buses and they got testimonies from them. And then they brought them to the bus drivers. These testimonies included things like, you're the reason why I can support my family, right? I'm a single mom and I rely on the bus every day to be able to go to work and support. Right? You are someone that's helping me get my education by providing me this transportation. Right? Things like that. And guess what? When they measured their sense of purpose 6 months later, it was actually higher. Right? So this is just kind of a shout out to say, I think regardless of the role, for the most part, there are ways as managers that we can connect some meaning to those roles. And that goes a long, long ways. All right, so the fourth way the work impacts morale is just the organization is successful. Right? It has a good reputation, more or less. It's achieving meaningful things. It's doing well. It's doing positive things in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the work itself. 15%, still a large percentage, something worth focusing on. Now, what source of morale do you think is going to fit in that last about 60%? Leadership. Research repeatedly shows that people aren't quitting their job or their organization. They're usually quitting their manager, and they're usually quitting their direct manager. Another way to put that is that people's direct manager has the greatest impact on one's morale. Now, I know at some level I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want to stress the fact that leadership and management is monumental to workplace morale. Now, this isn't, how do I put this? I get this isn't rocket science, right? I get that, right? But I think it's just as important, right? And my experience here is that most managers don't have this concept on their radar, that morale is your responsibility, right? That morale is your job, right? Now, sometimes there might be even things that we would put into one of the other three buckets here that we don't initially see as it being connected to management or leadership. Right? So let's say you have this coworker that's been a jerk for the last 2 years. Right? Who am I going to be upset at other than my jerky coworker? Probably my manager. And why? We're not doing anything about it, not holding them accountable. so on and so forth. This brings us, folks, to our morale equation. This is, again, simple in concept. I actually want you to memorize this one. In fact, if there's only one thing that you're going to remember from all of our time together, it's this right here. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff you can't pay people for or you can't punish people for, aka engagement. Skilled managers equals high morale equals all that cool stuff we can't pay or punish people for. Skilled management is how you get high morale. It's a requirement to get all those cool stuff that we listed before. So again, I just really want for you to grasp and internalize that you as a manager or as a leader are responsible for the morale of your employees. And you know what's really cool? When I see organizations or teams where every manager embraces that mindset, it really starts to change things. When every manager says it's my job to build morale with the people that I manage, changes everything. Anyways, we've gone this far. We haven't necessarily even defined workplace morale. So I'm going to do that real quickly. It's quite simple, actually. It's not personal happiness, how it feels in general to come to work each day. So that brings us back to our management radar. But number 2, the second game changer to get on your radar here is that morale really matters. And it's mostly my job as a manager and leader. Now, I know I said the first one might be the most important concept out of these 6, but maybe actually this one is the most important concept. They're all important, right? But you have, as a leader, have to own the fact that the morale of your people, and therefore of the greater organization, rests on your shoulders. And I get that's a lot of responsibility, but it's actually highly meaningful work if you choose to embrace that. Now, of course, employee morale is going to be impacted by so many different manager behaviors and factors that it's kind of hard to know where to begin, right? That's why in a little bit here, we're going to talk about the top 15 management skills that we should be practicing to create a work environment that creates the conditions for high morale, where people can bring their best selves, where people can feel cared about and respected. It's skilled managers that creates high morale. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast and listening to a little piece of our live recording of the Managing with Mind and Heart workshop. By the way, if you've ever wondered what some of our live virtual workshops are like, I hope you got a little bit of an idea for it here. Again, I encourage you to consider joining the thousands of other leaders that have participated in this workshop. And to do so, just go to our website, nashconsulting.com, and register for our next live series. All right, peace.